This was the man America loved, the lanky, stammering idealist, the decent common man who always found the courage to do the right thing, the friendly face you could always trust. Hollywood saw him as the boy next door, the nation's beloved older brother. They had no idea he was about to become one of their most decorated warriors. In the golden age of Hollywood, the landscape was dominated by giants. There were the tough guys, like Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney, men who lived in a world of shadows and smoke. There were the rugged cowboys, like John Wayne, who seemed carved from the very rock of Monument Valley. There was James Stewart. He wasn't a gangster, a gunslinger, or a cynical detective. He was something far more relatable. He was the awkward but principled hero, the man who spoke for the forgotten, who fought for the lost causes. His characters were defined by a gentle, almost clumsy sincerity. This on-screen persona was a national treasure. Audiences felt like they knew him, and they laughed. Not a laugh of mockery, but a warm, affectionate laugh of recognition. They laughed at his charming stumbles, his gangly 6'3" frame trying to fold itself into a chair, his voice that would crack and climb an octave when he was impassioned. He was loved for his perceived softness, for his non-threatening gentility. No one in Hollywood or in America looked at Jimmy Stewart and saw a commander of men, a warrior who would lead bomber squadrons deep into the heart of enemy territory. The man they thought they knew was a perfect gentleman, but the real man was a silent, coiled spring, waiting for a war to give him his true purpose. As the world descended into war, the man behind the persona grew restless. While many in Hollywood debated America's role, Jimmy Stewart, the son and grandson of military veterans, saw not a debate, but a duty. The folksy idealist he played on screen was about to be supplanted by a man of quiet, unshakable conviction. He wasn't going to entertain the troops, he was going to become one of them. Stewart was a man of action, not just words. Long before it was fashionable, he had become an accomplished pilot, earning his commercial license in 1938. He saw the storm gathering in Europe and understood that aviation would be the key to the coming conflict. In March of 1941, nearly 9 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor pulled America into the war, Jimmy Stewart, one of the biggest and highest paid movie stars in the world, walked away from his lucrative Hollywood career. He drove to a local enlistment office and attempted to join the United States Army Air Corps. He was the first major American star to enlist, and the Army promptly rejected him. The problem wasn't his health or his piloting skills. The problem was that he was too skinny. At 6'3", the minimum acceptable weight for a pilot trainee was 148 pounds. Stewart weighed in at just 143. He was 5 pounds underweight. For any other movie star, this would have been a quiet, respectable exit. He had tried to serve, he had been honorably rejected, and he could have easily transitioned into a safe, comfortable role making propaganda films or leading war bond drives for the duration of the war. His duty would have been more than fulfilled, but Jimmy Stewart was not playing a character anymore. He refused to take no for an answer. He went back to Hollywood, but not to a film set. He hired a studio trainer and a nutritionist, and for the next 2 months, he dedicated himself to a rigorous regimen of exercise and a high-calorie diet. He was determined to fight for his country, even if it meant first fighting the bureaucracy that was trying to keep him on the sidelines. He bulked up, gained 10 pounds, and in May of 1941, he walked back into the enlistment office and passed the weigh-in with ease. He demanded no special treatment, pulled no strings, and was sworn in as Private James Stewart. The boy next door was gone. A warrior had just been born. Jimmy Stewart was in the Army, but he was a long way from the war. For nearly 2 years, the Air Corps seemed unsure what to do with him. He was a movie star, an immensely valuable public relations asset. They assigned him to safe, domestic duties, training younger pilots, making public appearances, starring in recruitment films. For the Army, this was a perfect arrangement. For Stewart, it was a prison. He hadn't fought to get into the military just to play a soldier for the cameras. He was a highly skilled, multi-engine rated pilot, and he began a relentless campaign, petitioning his commanding officers, demanding to be sent overseas to a combat unit. In late 1943, his request was finally granted. Captain James Stewart was assigned to the 445th Bombardment Group of the 8th Air Force, stationed in Tyburn, England. The war he had fought to join was now very real. His aircraft was the B-24 Liberator, a plane notoriously difficult to fly. While the B-17 Flying Fortress was known for its ability to absorb incredible punishment, the B-24 had a different reputation. Its high-mounted wings and tricycle landing gear made it unforgiving, and its fuel tanks were poorly protected. Crews grimly joked that its official name, Liberator, was a dark reference to it liberating their souls from their bodies. They called it the Flying Coffin. Stewart's first mission was a raid on a U-boat facility in Kiel, Germany. It was the beginning of a brutal combat tour. He flew 20 official combat missions, often deep into the most heavily defended industrial centers of the Third Reich. These were grueling 8-hour flights into a sky filled with anti-aircraft flak and swarms of German fighters. His calm demeanor and exceptional skill in the cockpit earned him the respect of his men. He was promoted from captain to major, then to colonel in just 4 years, a meteoric rise based entirely on merit, not on his fame. He wasn't just flying missions, he was now planning them, first as a squadron commander and later as the group operations officer for his entire bomb wing, responsible for the lives of thousands of men. The man who returned to Hollywood in August of 1945 was a decorated hero. He was Colonel James Stewart, a respected commander who had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross twice. But he was not the same man who left. The war had taken a tremendous toll. He suffered from what was then called shell shock, or combat fatigue, what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder. He had lost friends, and he had sent men on missions from which they never returned. The easygoing, boyish charm was now backed by a quiet, profound gravity. He was haunted. He was deeply unsure if he could ever act again. He considered returning to his small town in Pennsylvania for good, but his friend, the director Frank Capra, convinced him to take on one more role. That role was George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. On the surface, it was a return to the familiar, idealistic characters he had played before the war. But underneath, it was something entirely different. The film's most powerful, unforgettable moments are scenes of George Bailey completely unraveling. His despair at the bridge, his violent rage in his own home, his desperate, broken prayer in the bar. These scenes are almost unbearably raw and real, because for Jimmy Stewart, they weren't just acting. He was channeling the very real trauma and horror he had experienced in the war. He was channeling the frustration, the fear, and the profound sense of loss that he had brought back with him from the skies over Germany. The famous stammer that was once a charming quirk was now a conduit for a deep and complex anguish. It's a Wonderful Life is a Christmas classic today, but upon its release, it was a box office disappointment. Audiences weren't ready to see their favorite idealist in such a dark, tormented place. But the war had unlocked a new depth in Jimmy Stewart, and it would change the course of his career forever. The simple heroes were gone. In their place were cynical, obsessive, and morally complex men. He sought out darker roles, collaborating with directors like Alfred Hitchcock and Anthony Mann, who could harness his newfound gravity. The war had killed the boy next door. It had replaced him with a man who understood the darkness of the human soul, because he had looked it right in the face. Throughout the rest of his long and celebrated career, Jimmy Stewart rarely, if ever, spoke of his combat missions. He never wrote a memoir. He never capitalized on his war record for publicity. In a town built on self-promotion, his silence on the subject was his most profound statement. When reporters would inevitably ask him about his heroism, he would deftly change the subject or simply say, "I was proud to have served." For Jimmy Stewart, service was not a chapter in his life, it was his life. He remained in the United States Air Force Reserve for another 2 decades after the war, dutifully attending drills and maintaining his flight status. In 1959, he was promoted to Brigadier General, becoming the highest-ranking actor in American military history. He retired from the Air Force in 1968 after 27 years of honorable service. Hollywood never laughed at him again. They were in awe. The stammering, idealistic boy next door they thought they knew was gone. In his place stood a quiet giant, a man whose real-life heroism and unwavering sense of duty surpassed any role he ever played on screen. What is your favorite Jimmy Stewart movie? After hearing his story, do you see his performances in a new light? Let us know in the comments.